Tennessee This Week from WATE's 6 on Your Side starts now.
After a quiet primary, the District 13 race heats up in the general election. Now we get to hear from a third candidate. He is not a Democrat or a Republican. Governor Haslam sets out to fix TN-ready testing before he leaves office, and the early steps to becoming Knoxville's next mayor on Tennessee This Week. Hello and welcome to Tennessee This Week. I'm Mark Mellinger in for Kristen Farley today. And today we are revisiting a race for Tennessee State House in District 13, one that wasn't really an issue in the primary since the Democrat and the Republican were both running unopposed. Now, we have already heard from them in this election cycle. Incumbent Eddie Smith facing a rematch with Democrat Gloria Johnson. Remember, they have faced each other twice before. The outcome was close both times. Well, today we are talking to another candidate in the race. Zachary Hawk is here. He is running as a Libertarian. And Zachary, it's good to have you with us today.
It's good to be here today.
Okay, so before we talk about what it means exactly to be a Libertarian, because there's still a lot of people watching who probably don't know, give me an idea of who you are as a person.
Well, I'm Zachary Hawk, as you said. I'm 26. I graduated from King University with a bachelor's degree in forensic science. It was there that I met my wife, and we moved back to Knoxville, where she's from, and settled in North Knoxville 2 years ago. Found the area extremely beautiful, and I've been starting to get politically active ever since coming to Knoxville.
What fired you up about getting involved in politics?
The bitter taste in my mouth after the 2016 elections was part of what really got me into it.
That's what inspired you?
That's what really inspired me.
The result or the race, period?
All of it.
All of it, okay.
The embroilment of competition, destroying the people that are supposed to be on your side, Republicans tearing other Republicans apart, Democrats tearing other Democrats apart, just to sit in a White House in an Oval Office. It was a very bitter thing, and it split the country a lot, more so than it has in my lifetime, I believe.
Yeah, and we're still there.
And we're still there. The thing is, there were third-party candidates that were absolutely much better than I thought the two main choices that we were presented were.
Okay. Yeah, well, and that said, and I don't know if you looked at the Libertarian candidate, was it Gary Johnson?
Gary Johnson.
It was Gary Johnson, that's what
Yes.
I thought. So explain to folks the Libertarian point of view and how a Libertarian such as yourself serves as a lawmaker if he gets elected.
The crux of the Libertarian Party is maximum freedom, minimal government. So the more we can get the government out of the way, the more free the people can be. The way we can do that is by reducing taxes. Reduce taxes, that's more money in the taxpayer's pocket. That means they're going to spend more because they've got more. That increases the economy greatly. It's all about freedom and individual freedom. It's a very individual thing. The ability to self-govern.
And how do you work then practically as a lawmaker if you get to the Tennessee House? Because, you know, well, first of all, it's almost all Republicans in the Tennessee House, but the other party is Democrats. I mean, how do you decide who to caucus with and things like that?
Well,
how do you get bills?
Well, the Libertarian Party has a statement of principles that we espouse. In order to become a member of the party, you have to agree to abide by those principles, and those are things that I hold very dear. So as long as there's no compromise on principle, I'll be able to vote for several bills like a budget that decreases spending while still balancing the budget.
Okay.
Constitutional carry, the legalization of cannabis in any form, recreational or medical.
You'll just take it issue by issue then?
Yes,
if you're
it's
in the legislature.
very issue by issue. I don't think you should go at it all the way and Just take it issue by issue, because that's exactly how you can keep your constituents informed.
Well, like, okay, you just mentioned sort of a hot button issue, so I'll go there. When you talk about, you know, the legalization of cannabis to some degree, I mean, if you get in there, is that one that you just put in the hopper and hope that the speaker gives it a hearing?
Absolutely. I think we're at a time. There's 3/5 of the country have legalized cannabis in some way, shape, or form. You don't see it really in the South. Tennessee's motto is agriculture and commerce. Where better than to look at cannabis as one of those things?
And you're saying recreational cannabis use, not just medical use, which one of the governor candidates supported in the Republican primary.
Yeah, full legalization. The cannabis community doesn't really like calling it recreational. You don't call it recreational drinking, but
well, some
people call it recreational drinking, I guess. But the thing about cannabis is you can look at it from so many aspects, particularly the criminal justice reform aspect. So many counties in Tennessee have overcrowded prisons and overcrowded county jails. You can reduce that and also reduce the burden on the taxpayer, because the taxpayer funds the housing for those inmates. You can release people that are deemed criminals for using a plant in their own body because it's nonviolent and it's not harmful. It's a victimless crime. So you can release that and then release them and.
Yeah, I mean, I get the rationale on that issue. Let's talk about another, you know, substance-related issue, and you know, this would be the opioid epidemic, which is huge everywhere, but especially here in the South. You did see state lawmakers take sort of a stutter step on that this past year, but we haven't really addressed this issue to a significant degree. I mean, where would you like to see Tennessee go when it comes to addressing the opioid epidemic? Totally different thing than what we were just talking about.
I mean, really, it's not.
Yeah?
You can address the opioid epidemic by legalizing cannabis. It gives doctors another avenue to prescribe something that can take care of things that opioids do: pain, anxiety, and it can help degenerative diseases. We have the research.
But what about other opioids? I mean, okay, I understand what you're saying there, but what about other opioids that are getting abused in terms of prescription, in terms of being mixed with street drugs in a particularly deadly form? And what do we do? I think what do we do about that is what I'm trying to ask.
Well, the thing is there's a prohibition here. Prohibition didn't work for alcohol. It's not working for many drugs right now. It's
you wouldn't set a limit on like fentanyl, or?
I think if you get rid of the stigma, stop treating it like a crime, start treating it like addiction, like a medical issue, you can start to see improvements with that. When people get out of jail for minor things, often their lives are thrown into a spiral, which drives them to go back into the things that drove them to jail in the first place, and it, you know, increases recidivism, and it creates this vicious cycle that feeds into itself. And we just keep persecuting people for something that should be handled medically.
Okay, I understand where you're coming from there. We have just a few minutes left, so I want to get to some of the other important issues. And, you know, one of those would definitely be health insurance, health care coverage. A lot of Tennesseans still don't have it. This state has tried a couple of times unsuccessfully to expand Medicaid. There are a lot of people who are, you know, caught in that gap where they can't get Medicaid, but they also can't get subsidies. What would you suggest we do on this issue?
Part of it is a failure on the federal government. Our federal legislators have made a caveat where our state's taxpayer dollars cannot come back to the state until we expand Medicaid. I think it would be a wonderful thing to petition our federal legislators to create a block grant to get that money back into Tennessee. because I don't really think that insurance is a good vehicle for what for healthcare. It's an insurance based on risk and not maintenance. With maintenance, you usually give that to a free market, and they compete for your competition, thereby driving down cost. And then you can have a catastrophic type of insurance plan for things that are beyond basic general maintenance of the human body. So something like direct primary care, where you can, it's a subscription-based program where you can pay $80 for a family. Even if the government is paying that money, it's still much less than paying $600, $700 a month in insurance.
Well, let's move on to another one that's on everybody's mind, and that's schools. Everybody wants better schools. We've seen problems with the TN Ready testing. I mean, better schools cost more money. I guess that, as a libertarian, I'd ask you, how do we pay for them? That's the thing. As a libertarian, I would want to see reducing amount of money going into the government. One of the ways that we can do that is by utilizing technology. We're in a technological age that we did not see 20 years ago. It's very easy and cheap to get your hands on a tablet. So for areas that it makes sense, we can provide tablets, and these kids can do schooling at home. We can utilize a diversity of different education options, such as STEM academies and community co-ops. You done? Okay, that's okay. I'll jump in because I wanted to ask you about one more thing before we go, and that's the economy. I mean, that's what everybody wants to talk about when it comes to what is my lawmaker doing to help bolster the economy. What would you say on that?
Well,
our economy's been in a good direction. In a fairly low tax, except for the sales tax, state.
So with the economy, something that you can easily do is stop protecting corporations. I don't believe.
What do you mean by that?
Corporate welfare, taking taxpayer dollars and saying, "Hey, if you come here, we'll give you all these tax breaks."
But everybody's doing. I mean, in reality, will that work? Because everybody's giving tax incentives and throwing those at companies.
I don't mind a lower tax threshold for. Like lowering taxes on businesses and lowering the entry point for businesses to be created.
But you're saying not special tax breaks.
But not special tax breaks for corporations. I don't think that was a fix. I think what we need to do is find ways to bolster small businesses. Make sure that they're the focal point, not necessarily in funneling taxpayer dollars to them, but making sure that they're not stepped on by corporations.
Zachary Hawk, thank you for coming. Good luck to you in the race.
Thank you very much.
And coming up, we are hearing from our panel of pundits as Governor Haslam starts his listening tour for TN Ready. And we're talking about the hopefuls already taking steps to become Knoxville's next mayor. You're watching Tennessee This Week on WATE 6 on your side. And we welcome you back to Tennessee This Week. I'm Mark Mellinger in for Kristen Farley, and it is time to hear from our panel of pundits. Joining me today, WATE 6 on your side healthcare analyst Craig Griffith, WATE 6 on your side political contributor Courtney Piper, and attorney James Corcoran with us today. Good to see you all.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah.
And I also want to throw out, get well wishes to Kristen.
Absolutely.
She's a little bit under the weather, so our wishes as a panel to get well soon.
It's not going to be anything long term. I think she's going to be back next week, and viewers will be thankful for that. So let's go ahead and talk about Zachary Hawk, the guy who was just up here with me. We know this is probably going to be a really close race, between Eddie Smith and Gloria Johnson. I guess the question is, does he play enough of a wild card to affect the outcome? Courtney, I'll start with you.
Sure, and I should mention too that I've donated to Gloria Johnson's campaign. She's the Democrat running.
Appreciate
in
the disclaimer. Yeah.
So, and last time 2 years ago when Gloria and Eddie faced off, about 150 votes separated them.
Really close.
So if you have a really good credible third-party candidate, in this case a libertarian, and libertarians, you know, they can be party neutral, but some tend to lean more conservative. If that person can just pull 150 votes away from Eddie Smith, that puts Gloria in the game. And depending on how hard Zachary is going to work, and by that I mean knocking on doors, because that is the most effective strategy, he could really pull a lot of votes from Eddie, which propels Gloria into that victory.
Craig, what do you think? You agree?
Well, I agree. It was 151 votes last time, so anything can happen. If he has a big family. he could get 150 votes.
You'd have to have a really big family.
So
yeah.
you know, it could sway. I mean, it's a time-honored tradition that a third-party candidate can adjust the outcome of any election. So I think it'll be interesting to see how it does. Eddie's had more time to be in office now. He's done more legislating, as they say. So I think that he's probably getting stronger, and as the incumbent, obviously has the upper hand. But here, as you know, Courtney was saying, it's whoever gets out and knocks on the doors. Whoever gets out and does the grassroots campaigning, gets out there, vote on election day. Usually it'll prevail in this type of election.
Well, and two, is it a red wave or blue wave election nationally, and do we see some of those coattails here in Tennessee? I mean, do we have strong performances?
As I predicted, you know, I don't think that any wave is going to make it across the Appalachian Mountains.
Yeah, okay.
So I
this
think
is where it stops.
Tennessee will probably be not affected by that. But that said, there are Democrats in each race now, which there hasn't been for, what, maybe the last 2 election cycles. So, you know, things can happen. You know, we're obviously having a real, probably a pitch battle between Bredesen and Blackburn on the Senate level. And I think it'll be a strong race between Lee and Dean at the governor's race. So things are possible.
James, I want to get to you. And I mean, let's talk about Zachary Hawk, or, you know, probably more appropriately, just the libertarian message. I mean, you listened to the interview. Is that stuff going to resonate with people?
Well, the question is he going to be able to get his message anywhere? I took a look at his financials, and there's a difference between just being on the ballot and being a candidate. I think he's got he's spent about $170, which won't buy you a whole lot more than maybe about 500 rack cards, even if you are out there knocking on doors. And so will people even recognize that he's a libertarian candidate when they actually get into the ballot booth? Because they've not passed ballot access for libertarians, so he won't be identified as libertarian. He will just be a name with nothing else by it in the booth. So while some libertarians might trend more Republican-leaning or Democratic-leaning, I don't think he's really put himself in a financial position to get people to identify who he is, unless there's a big change between the last financial disclosure and Election Day.
But there is a Libertarian Party in Knox County. So
there is,
if he just leverages that base and goes to meetings and reaches out to his friends and neighbors and knocks on doors and, like I said, continues to go to meetings, there are probably 150 Libertarian voters in Knox County that would recognize he's a Libertarian.
It is a fair point. I want to move on to education now. We got to talk about Governor Haslam launching his listening tour for TN Ready, wanting to get this problem-plagued test series, fixed before he leaves office. So, you know, the question is, what does he need to do that? And what do you think of the governor's response to this problem? This is awfully late in the term to have a listening tour, huh, Craig?
Right. And he said in his announcement for this listening tour that he's committed to fixing it. And I guess the question that I have, is that what we need to do, or do we need to step back and see what's in the best interest of the Tennessee children in terms of testing? Is 10 Ready the direction you need to go? I firmly believe that you had to have some sort of standardized testing, but how do you do it? It's been a disaster for the last, several go-arounds. So I'm not so sure that the listening tour shouldn't be, how do we need to assess the progress of our students and teachers in the classroom?
I think a lot of people feel that way, James. They're like, what do we have to listen for? Everybody knows this thing's a disaster, and we know what the problems are. What are we listening for?
Well, I think the problem was in execution rather than in the idea itself. I mean, we have to have some objective way to measure the fact that our children are or are not making progress. And the real question should be, I think, internally as to what went wrong, how did we mess this up, and what are we going to do to fix it, rather than putting on the show of going out and doing this listening tour.
Well, Courtney, we know some of the things that have gone wrong, though, with it, right?
We know exactly what is wrong with this. We know that it's August and his term is going to be up at the end of the year. We're electing a new governor in November. I don't know what he thinks he's going to fix. It was interesting to me that in that his announcement, he said he wanted to fix the problem, but the strategy for the listening tour seems to just be kind of kicking the can down the road until our next governor takes office and that person can solve the problem. We know exactly what the problems are, one of which is access to broadband across the state of Tennessee, and until that gets fixed, we cannot administer tests across the state on the internet.
Right.
And we know that to be a fact. We know that there have been problems with vendors, and for the life of me, I can't figure out why we don't have procurement professionals that can identify better vendors.
Well, that's I think the question on everybody's mind. Why do we still have Questar
this
as the
vendor
vendor?
that they used, did the job in several states. So,
but there were other states where it failed too.
So the question is, what is unique here? And I think that's probably what Haslam's trying to find out.
Well, we'll see if he's able to snuff it out, as it were, right? Still to come, the potential candidates are starting to line up with their eyes on becoming Knoxville's next mayor. We will look at the latest addition to that list coming up. You're watching Tennessee This Week on WATE 6 on your side. And we welcome you back to Tennessee This Week. Our conversation continues with Craig Griffith, Courtney Piper, and James Corcoran. Well, now we are looking even further down the road to the race to be Knoxville's next mayor. Earlier in the month, we learned that Copper Cellar CEO Mike Chase had filed paperwork naming a treasurer in a run for Knoxville City Mayor. You may remember earlier in the summer, India Kincannon and Eddie Manis filed those papers as well. So I guess the question first, and I'll go to you, James. What do you think about the names that we've heard so far?
Well, there are some very qualified folks. I think there's also talk about Councilman Marshall Stair getting involved. I think every one of those candidates brings something unique to the table. I think, and each one of them would be very qualified for the job.
And do you? I mean, we've heard a lot about Marshall Stair. Anybody have any inside information? I mean, is he in, or can we? Do we know?
He's definitely running.
He's in for sure.
Definitely running for sure. Yeah. He told me last week he was. So
okay.
I think it's he's in there.
So I mean, it's an awfully crowded field with at least a couple former members of Mayor Rajero's administration jumping in. How do you see this one shaping up, Courtney, based on who we have so far?
Well, our city races are nonpartisan.
They are technically nonpartisan.
Right. So what that means in terms of how does a primary and a general shake out? If the top voter does not get 50% plus one of the vote, then the general election, they're facing off with the second place person for the mayor's race. So
yeah, that makes no one knows that Madeline is a Democrat or that Victor Hash was a Republican.
That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter
because
not officially, right?
Right. But what it means in terms of how does a primary and a general work if you don't have parties? Well, somebody's got to get 50% plus one, and if nobody gets 50% plus one, then the top two people move on. So by the quality of folks that we have who've already indicated either interest or they have filled out their paperwork for a treasurer, we're probably looking at a runoff. We've got strong candidates that are really interested in serving as city mayor, and so we are undoubtedly looking at a runoff for our city mayor next year.
You agree, Craig? Size this one up.
Well, probably so. It's early. There could be more people get in, and some of these people may drop out. So I think they don't have a very refined platform at this time. What are they going to run on? What would be their goals for an administration? I've talked with some people that are supporting Mike Chase, and he says he's going to really try to streamline development in the city and things like that.
Well, he's really hammered Mayor Rajero, even though they're both Democrats,
right,
unofficially.
Yeah. Well, on Cumberland Avenue.
On the Cumberland Avenue
But
project,
Cumberland Avenue project is over. So is it going to dig it up?
He still thinks we're spending too much money downtown.
Yeah. Well, these are the platform items that we'll need to see. We'll need to see some more specifics. We'll need to have a campaign.
Okay.
To see who's going to get the favor of the public. But I would agree that we'll probably have a runoff. Most of the candidates are going to be very well funded. So I think it will be a hotly contested race.
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to be. I mean, each of you 10 seconds. What should the platform be? What should they be running on a winning candidate in this race?
the winning platform. The economy is always big. Downtown baseball stadium is always a hot button issue. Sidewalks in neighborhoods drive people to the polls.
Anything to add, James?
I'd say, crime and the drug problem, it's been getting worse and worse. It's probably going to be a factor as well, because it's not all just greenways and parks.
We'll see how it shakes out. That's our time. Remember, we do post episodes for you to watch and share at WATE.com. We hope you'll join us again next Sunday at noon for more Tennessee This Week.